Okay, let's get started. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Gulf Intelligence Daily Energy Markets live video podcast on Friday, the 7th of April. Brent crude still hovering around 84 to 85, where it's been all week after the shock news of last weekend. We're going to discuss how great a shock it was. And I've got three real gurus here with me to discuss what all that means. So let me introduce, or rather welcome back, Kate Durian, contributing editor to MEIS and non-resident fellow at the Arab Gulf States Institute in Washington. Hello, Kate.
Hello.
Mehmet Uçu, I hope I pronounced that correctly, Mehmet, who is the Group CEO of the Global Resources Partnership and Chairman of the London Energy Club.
Good morning.
Hello and welcome back. And finally, old friend Daniel Ramat, Senior Energy Security Consultant based in Tehran. Hello, Dan. So,
hello, Frank. Hello, everybody.
Hi. We have a great mix of energy ethnicity here today, I think. But I know that it's been the top subject on the Daily Energy Market podcast all week. But of course, it was the story in global oil markets as well. Probably for the first half of this year. And it's the first chance that this panel has had to deliver a verdict on it. The shock cuts announcement, or shock or surprise, whichever you prefer, announced last weekend by Saudi Arabia, led by Saudi Arabia, announced by OPEC Plus later. So, Kate, let me come to you first. Give me your considered reaction here after the initial bump up. Crude markets have been relatively stable all week, haven't they? Hovering around, what some people call the Goldilocks level, $85 a barrel, and showing no sign so far of the big spike upwards that some people had predicted. So has the market just taken this in its stride? What do you think?
I think it's crunching the numbers. When you look at OPEC Plus production, even after they cut their quotas by 2 million barrels a day. And there is a distinction. This cut is from actual production by those that have been producing at quota. So take out, say, 1.7 million, because they were underproducing by that much, below their targets. And you've got this cut by 8 members. 500,000 barrels a day from Russia was already factored in. So it's not really such a huge cut. And when you consider that there's, some Russian oil on water, this is going to mop it up. So basically, it's, if you calculate the numbers, you're not going to come up with 1.66 million barrel a day cut. It's going to be a lot less. So the first half, it remains to be seen what happens in the second half. One would assume that Saudi Arabia and the few who have joined it in making those cuts knew what it's doing. They're not going to play monopoly with their biggest source of revenue. They must have seen, read the tea leaves, maybe Chinese tea leaves. So I think it's not as big a deal as initially thought. Right.
But not as big a deal, principally because it won't amount to 1.66 as the headline figure. It will probably turn out more around 800,000 or so, won't it?
I think so, yes. We haven't crunched the numbers completely, but if you take out the fact that several members are not going to be taking part in the cuts because they were underproducing anyway, so yeah, it makes for a much smaller cut than the headline number would suggest, and I think that's why the market has had time to digest the numbers and say, "Hang on a second, this isn't." Yeah.
Mehmet, let me move to you. because and staying on the same theme, some doubts about whether the Russian cuts announced over a month ago now, 500,000. Some doubts whether that's coming through, and also Saudi Arabia is already 130,000 barrels a day down on its current target. So that seems to reinforce what Kate was saying about the extent and durability of these cuts, and hence the muted market reaction after the initial spike. It has stayed where it is. What do you think?
Well, this was a surprise decision, of course, to cut production. However, it wasn't unexpected, because anytime the price comes down $80, Saudi Arabia, other Gulf countries will definitely act, and Russia, in that case, suffering under the sanctions, needing more foreign exchange earnings, wouldn't tolerate the price going down, because there wasn't any expectation that the Chinese demand will go up as expected after the easing of COVID restrictions. And also, we heard from the IMF that the global growth will come down significantly, about 3% for the Western world, developed countries, over the next 5 years. Except China and India, perhaps there's going to be more growth. So lower growth, lower prices, and so there was no other option left for Saudi Arabia and Russia and other OPEC countries to increase to reduce the level of production in order to maintain a steady flow of income from. It's not probably easy to meet this production cut targets, but I think they will do everything possible for that. Plus, we had the removal of 450,000 barrels of oil coming from Iraqi Kurdistan through Turkey.
Yeah, we want to talk about this. Yeah.
This was also another, factor in which the price spike started, and so they had to take some action. Although this was shock or unexpected, I think everybody knows that whenever the price comes down below $80, there is going to be a reaction.
Okay. Of course, Saudi Arabia says that it never thinks about the oil price when it, reaches its deliberations on oil and OPEC plus policy. The price, they say, is not a factor. It is balancing the markets. But I think we all know the price, of course, is a factor, even though they say that there is no break even now in Saudi. The finance minister came out with this statement a few weeks back saying we no longer look at a break-even figure because our economy is so diversified that we don't need to think of oil income, which it was quite a bold statement. But
plus, I mean, you should also consider that there has been a trade diversion because of the sanctions. Now the Russian oil is flowing more and more to Asia Pacific at discounted prices. So there is need to make up this as well from the Russian point of view.
Yeah. They are furious about price caps and also worried that it might be extended to them. There is more talk about OPEC legislation in America, isn't there? Let me go to Daniel Ramat over there in Tehran. Hi, Daniel. How does it look from your side of the Persian Gulf or the Arabian Gulf, whichever you want to call it? Did this take Iran by surprise? Iran, of course, is a member of OPEC, but I doubt it was involved in these kind of discussions last weekend, was it? What's the view from Tehran on this?
At the moment, as you know, Iran's oil production and oil exports is significantly less than what it used to be before the sanctions. Iran used to export 2.3 million barrels of oil before the Trump sanctions on Iran. And now the total Iranian oil and gas condensate exports is something about 1.2 million barrels per day. So there is still a very huge gap between what Iran used to export and what is exporting right now. So Iran is not going to participate in any production reduction. And of course, any such actions made by Saudi Arabia or the others, which could increase the power, which could make the markets warmer for Iranian oil, is absolutely welcomed by Iranian National Oil Company. So I think Iran is very happy with that, but there are still many concerns. Huge amounts of Russian oil is going to China. Saudi Arabia has guaranteed supply of oil to China, and also China is the sole market for Iranian oil, sole real market for Iranian oil, because Iran is exporting some oil to Syria, Venezuela, elsewhere, but the Chinese oil is the sole place which money comes back to the country. So despite the reduction of production and the increase of the prices, which makes Iran very happy, but still there are problems with Russian, especially the Ural and the Western grades of oil, which are, because the Eastern grades used to be in China even before the sanctions, even before the price cap, everything. So Iran is very happy with that, but has its own concerns.
Okay, let's consider possible reactions for a moment, if we can. Mehmet, I know that you were looking at the European Energy Council meetings earlier in the week. I saw that as kind of a restatement of what is, normal current policy in light of the Ukraine war. But you thought it was something more than that and could be a response to the OPEC Plus cuts. Tell us.
Well, about 2 days ago, the usual EU-US Energy Council met in Brussels. They had a long joint statement in which, if you read between the lines, they make it quite clear that they will continue their efforts to enforce the sanctions against Russia. They will not allow any attempts to skirt the sanctions and through different mechanisms. And they also made it clear that in their statement afterwards, that they will take actions to counter what OPEC Plus is trying to do in terms of reducing output and then destabilizing the energy markets. This is how they put it. Therefore, it looks that on the EU-US side, if you can call them West, will be taking measures jointly to counter what OPEC Plus is trying to do. And so the measure objective being that we will.
I'm wondering, Mehmet, what can they do in a practical sense? If that statement said that the US was going to, go all out, increasing shale production, and really flooding the market with its own oil, then I would say that it had some teeth. But I can't really see what they can do to affect OPEC Plus policy. Enforcing sanctions is one thing, but they would have to move to secondary sanctions, wouldn't they, to have any meaningful effect on this part of the world?
Well, as we saw, sanctions have not worked as they planned. Therefore, further sanctions, whatever it might be, will not have much credibility. However, the US always used the strategic reserves. As you know, under the IEA emergency measures, you have 90 days of imports already stocked as strategic reserves. And whenever there is any problem with the market supply, on the supply side, IEA member countries led by US and EU always release some strategic reserves so that there is some additional oil in the market if there are cuts on the OPEC Plus side. I don't know whether they will do this, because I also know that the US strategic reserves are at a lower level now.
They're very low.
They need to replenish it. So I think this might be just a rhetorical statement showing that they act in unison against any attempts to reduce the global oil production. Because it's also election time in the US coming, there will be nominations. So they have to give some message to the public. On the other hand, also, let's not forget that US is the #1 producer of oil in the world.
Can be,
exporter, but also US companies, US-based multinationals are benefiting from that.
Thanks, Mehmet. Kate, let me ask you about this, because there does seem to be anger in the West, in America in particular, simmering away about the OPEC Plus cuts since last October, really. But how real is it? Is it as Mehmet just said, rhetoric? What real sanction can they bring in? What about NOPEC? Which is again surfaced. Give us your thoughts.
Sorry, I'm having to move because the internet in this room is acting up. So I didn't really hear the first part of your question, but it's okay, because I think
this is live TV, folks.
My phone is talking to me. Yes, my sincere apologies, but I have to move to the room where the internet is, because I still don't have a permanent place to live in. in Dubai. So anyway, one point I wanted to make about what Mehmet said about the strategic reserves, the IEA. If you look at the fine print of the IEA's oil market report, they're basically saying countries don't really have to refill their reserves at this point because they don't want to tighten the market any further. So the 90-day rule isn't being applied strictly by the IEA at the moment. So that's just one point. This is me, ex-IEA speaking. I think they're in a bind. You impose sanctions or secondary sanctions. You've already got, as Mehmet said, 400,000+ MIP that doesn't look like it's about to come on the market very soon from both Iraq and the Kurdistan region. The pipeline remains closed. What was surprising was that this cut was made while prices were actually on the way up. They weren't on the way down, because after the initial panic over the banking crisis subsided, prices were on the way up again. So they were actually closer to 80 than they were to 70.
Yeah, you're right.
And also the fact that it was done on a Sunday before the Joint Monitoring Committee meeting had taken place on the Monday. The fact that there were no leaks, so they meant to spring a surprise on the market, even though they had said, yes, Prince Abdulaziz bin Salman had said, yes, the quotas are there to stay until the end of the year. Watch December, watch us in December to see that. But he had also said, we will tweak if necessary. And I think that's, but again, all these predictions that the market's going to tighten in the second half remains to be seen. But when you have inflationary pressure, this is going to stoke it, because already, I think on this program a few days ago, somebody was saying in California, gasoline prices are rising, inflation is, everybody's talking about rising food prices, etc. So I think it's a very delicate time. And the IMF now saying, growth isn't going to be as robust. So, and next year as well.
Yeah.
So, it's a rather precarious situation, but NOPEC, I think, it's been talked about so much that I think it's an old chestnut. Whether it actually goes ahead or not is
no, I can't really see it myself.
Yeah.
Let's change tack, Mehmet. There is a lot going on in the Caucasus, northern Iraq, and Turkey. Tell us the state of play, the latest on Kurdish oil shipments. They were blocked after a ruling by international arbitration authorities recently. Where are we now? What happens next?
Well, this arbitration verdict against Turkey, which penalized Turkey for $1.4 billion, and after almost, since 2014, this case was going on, Iraq asked for $30 billion, and 1.4 for this reason is a peanut in this regard. And who's going to pay this, Turkey or KRG or jointly, or Iraq might withdraw also its claim perhaps as part of a package deal. So we have to see. However, as you say, Turkey, at the request of Iraq, stopped the exports 450,000 barrels per day through Ceyhan. And now both Erbil and Baghdad agreed on a tentative deal so that they can resume exports. However, Turkey is stopping there because Turkey wants to be sure that the second phase of the arbitration, which is from 2018-2023, another 1.5 billion perhaps, will be perhaps renegotiated with Baghdad. So they want to be sure that there will be no further liabilities on Turkey. And also payment system is changing now from Halkbank to Central Bank of Iraq, and SOMO will be in the picture according to new agreement. And all the oil executives of companies operating in KRG were in the meeting in Baghdad as well. So this seems to be a durable, sustainable deal.
Okay, so is oil flowing at the moment?
No, it's not flowing at the moment.
Okay,
because they said that it can flow this week, but it hasn't happened yet.
Okay,
because probably Turkey has some reservations on the deal that they made in Baghdad.
Okay, Daniel, that has wider implications, doesn't it? Because as you pointed out to me yesterday, Israel gets an awful lot of its oil from Ceyhan, from Kurdish oil, which has been fairly good value so far, quite cheap, I believe. What does Israel do without that oil? Where does it go?
There are two countries, actually two. two sources for the considered as sustainable sources of oil for Israel in the Middle East region. One of them used to be the Kurdistan region, the Iraqi Kurdistan, and the second one is the Azerbaijan Republic. Now, Israelis have lost one of their major sustainable, reliable source of crude oil, which was Kurdistan. As you know, Baghdad does not recognize Israel, and it would be very, very hard for Baghdad to export oil to Israel because it's going to bring a lot of pressure on the government. And I do not believe that Baghdad would agree with Kurdistan to resume exports of oil to Israel. So Israel needs to seek for another source of sustainable crude oil supplier, which this I think would impressively threaten Israel's energy security. One of their choices would be importing more oil from Azerbaijan, but Azerbaijan has its own. Yeah, I think they're doing that, but they have some technical problems because the Azerbaijani crude oil production has been decreasing during all these years, and Azerbaijan has started to import crude oil from Turkmenistan and from Kazakhstan through the Caspian. But those numbers are very limited due to limited infrastructure on the Caspian Sea for importing oil, because Azerbaijan has always been an exporting oil country. So they have a lot of technical problems, and I do not think in a short time they would be able to actually export that amount of oil which can offset the Kurdistan oil to Israel.
Okay.
Maybe they need to import Russian ones.
Sorry?
Maybe they need to import Russian ones or Kazakh oils which are coming through the Caspian pipeline in Black Sea. Maybe they need to do that.
Right. Dan, let me stay with you for a moment, briefly, because there were reports earlier this week of increasing tensions between Iran and Azerbaijan. You know, this is yet another element in this regional jigsaw, isn't it? How serious is this? You know, can this take on a military shape?
The situation is very complicated, very, very complicated, because Iran has something about 15 to 18 million Turkish population, Azerbaijani population here. And this population have sympathy with the Azerbaijan Republic. But the big game here, which is going on, which is going to link Turkey to Azerbaijan through the Zangezur corridor, would somehow put Iran aside of every geopolitical game, which at the end of the day would reduce Iran's cards in negotiating with China, because the big game is to get Turkey connected to China and establish another corridor, which is called the Middle Corridor, which is going to be replaced by the Iran corridor as a part of the One Road Belt initiative. So the situation is very complicated. But as you know, the establishments like Iran, their main priority, just like Islamic Republic of Iran, the main priority of the whole establishment is security. Economy, blah, blah, are the second or the next priorities. So Iran would consider its own security and geopolitical affairs as its first priority, and they're going to counter Azerbaijan's decision to somehow conquer and make a passage in the southern parts of Armenia. Right. But I'm not sure whether this is going to result in a military, let's say, war or something like that. There is a lot of doubt about it. I think Azerbaijan is Mr. Aliyev knows that there would be a limited time, 1 decade or so, to change the whole country's economic figure. They're not going to be able to remain a major energy exporter, because the energy transition is going on in Europe, and the cost of exporting natural gas to Europe is very high, because the pipeline from Baku to Tbilisi to Turkey and then to South Europe is very high. So they need to make a fundamental change in their economy. I think Mr. Aliyev wants to make its country into its economy into a transportation economy, to become a part of the ring of the
logistics,
whole logistics. You're right.
Let's
I think they have made their
not get
decision.
too much in detail on the Azerbaijan economy, but Kate, you know this part of the world well too, don't you? Just give me an overview of all this, this big energy jigsaw that we have there in the Caucasus. What do you think?
Well, I don't really know the area very well, but I do know that there's also an Israeli element there, isn't there? I mean,
Yeah.
It's
Azerbaijan,
Israeli,
Israel.
that Azerbaijan, Israel, which has really, rattled Iran. But on the other hand, you've got Iran moving, establishing an embassy in the UAE, diplomatic ties with
Saudi Arabia.
established with Saudi Arabia. So I think that's quite an interesting dynamic. So you're getting a shift in the geopolitics. China is obviously a big part of it because it's underwriting this, this reestablishment of relations. Of course, it's going to lessen tensions in some parts of the Middle East, maybe find a resolution in Yemen, no more threat of attacks against Saudi Arabian energy infrastructure.
Right.
And I don't know what the quid pro quo is going to be, but I mean, a few weeks ago, we were speaking on this same channel and somebody was saying, oh, the Chinese don't care so long as the oil from the Middle East is flowing. But I think that's changing. I think China's becoming more of a foreign policy player, more of a diplomatic player. And
Kate, let me stop you there because I think you must have read my script. Because now I would like to talk about that subject, the Saudi Iran rapprochement and China's influence. So here is the survey question this week. The rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran could be a game changer in Middle East politics that will lead to a period of peace, prosperity, and unity. Or, given the long-standing animosity between the two, it could all fall apart with the first Houthi drone. So is it, single choice here, please, 1, a permanent peace between the two biggest players in the Middle East, and indeed the two biggest players in Islam, or 2, a fragile rapprochement that will crumble at the first sign of tension? So vote on that, please.
I wish we had another choice.
What would the other choice be, Mehmet? Sorry, Dan.
Yeah,
what would it be?
I think the fundamentals of Iran-Saudi Arabia relations has not changed, but they both are considering China as a major ally and the one they need to work with. So as long as China wants this peace, this is going to continue. So I think the China.
I've lost you, Daniel.
Yes.
Yeah, have we all lost him?
Yes, I think we lost him.
Shame.
I thought I was getting
maybe
lost.
He'll come back.
Let me substitute him.
Internet problems in Tehran must be considerable. Mehmet, let me ask you about that. China, Saudi, Iran. Is this peace in our lifetime, or is it fragile?
Well, I think it's fragile. And it's also, you have to see the jigsaw, as you said, geopolitical jigsaw. On the one hand, you have the Abraham Accords, by which Israel is engaging quite heavily with the Gulf countries and other Middle Eastern countries. Then Iran is bringing to the picture, China is bringing Iran to the picture at a time when the US influence in the region is at the lowest ebb. Therefore, there isn't much trust in the US in terms of security provision. And then trade is moving in the direction of China and India. Therefore, I think if these trends continue, trade, investment, and geopolitical shift, I think there will be less room for the West to wield influence in the region. So Iran has to be brought in the picture. But on the other hand, you have Israel, of course, in Azerbaijan, which is an important factor for the tensions between Tehran and Baku. I don't think it will turn into any military conflict because Turkey is always behind Azerbaijan in a strong way. Israel is there. That's one of the reasons why Iran is so disturbed, some sort of containment they feel. And then Turkey is also building, we didn't mention that, from Basra to Turkey, what sort of a Turkish Belt and Road initiative with Iraq. There's going to be a highway, railways and pipelines passing through. So it's going to connect Basra to Turkey. Therefore, I think this peace between Iran and Saudi Arabia could be sustainable for some time, but at a serious harm, as you say in your question, whether a Houthi attack, drone attack, could destabilize it, or there could be some intelligence work trying to destabilize this relationship. So it's a fragile one. We have to see whether it will be lasting.
Kate, let me get your opinion. Is it here forever or fragile?
I don't think it's here forever. And again, don't forget that who is actually in charge of this sort of expansionist policy of interference in the affairs of other countries? It's the IRGC in Iran. You know, even in Iran, you don't see a coherent policy. So, you know, are they going to stop their involvement in Syria? Are they going to stop their support for Hamas, for Hezbollah in Lebanon? I think that's still going to create a lot of tensions. I don't think it's going to go away because it's one of the few cards that Iran has, you know, being isolated by sanctions. So I think it may be in everybody's interest at the moment to have this détente, whether it's a lasting peace, again, underwritten by China, but how much is China going to push to, you know, they've got so many other balls in the air that they're juggling at the moment.
Yeah, as you say, Syria, Hezbollah, etc. And also, I think what happens in Yemen next is also pretty key to all this. So here's the result. Most people think, a big majority think that it will not last forever, and I think that's probably the correct view. Well, look, thank you all very much. I'm sorry we lost Daniel Ramatz, it seems, from Tehran. I would imagine the problems of internet connections in Tehran must be quite considerable, but that's a shame. But nonetheless, thank you, Daniel, for your contribution that was truncated. Here he is. He's back.
Yeah, my apologies. Yeah, you know, since I need to use VPN getting connected to the podcast, so I lost my connection.
We were wondering what happened to you. I was just wrapping up, but I'll give you 1 minute, if you would, to give us your view on the Saudi Iran rapprochement. How permanent is it? 1 minute, please, Daniel.
I think, as I said, there is no fundamental change in the Iranian-Saudi Arabian relations. That the only factor which is recently added to the equations is the presence of China and their will to maintain energy security in the region. So I think as long as Chinese want this energy security to be here, Iran and Saudi Arabia will be forced to do so. And I think the push on the Iranian side is more on the Saudi side. But there is another factor I'm considering, that Saudi Arabia is using its relations with China as a leverage on the US administration. So if the Republicans come to the White House again, everything would be changed because Saudi would have the upper hand in this equation. So this is not this. I cannot call it fragile, but this is not going to be permanent.
Okay, that seems to be the general view. Massive majority saying that it won't last. Well, we've run out of time. So thank you, the three of you, Mehmet, Daniel, Kate. Always a great pleasure as ever to see you all. Thank you very much. I'm sure next week will be just as exciting as the one just gone. Hope to see you next week. Thank you all very much. Goodbye.
See you. Thank you. Bye-bye. Goodbye.